Thanks, Nick. So a little homage to Portland here, if you'll bear with me. Hopefully we can see this.
Real quick. Oh my god. Probably most has a top 10 text. So update. I gotta watch this movie. Help. Eric. Text.
Right?
Help. Or text. I gotta watch all these movies before I have to return them. Up on my queue and I'll take many photos. There's no more text. YVR report. Facebook update.
Fred, wait. You know what's happening when you're spiraling, you're out of control. There's too many things going on.
Check my text.
Yeah, right?
Please help me. Please help me out. Can you help me?
Yes.
Text. And I think that you're okay. Just help me. Checking out. Checking my text.
That's even preschool. That's even before computers, and internet, and iPads, and YouTube, and Tumblr. For your fantasy baseball league, your Netflix deal.
Which I have to watch.
Now, how can you look? You're in a technology group.
So that's from Portlandia. I've got a few connection points to Portland in this piece. But that video, I think I actually hadn't seen the show, or I'd seen it a little bit over the years. I saw that was from episode 1 of that show. I saw it about a month ago. I was like, that'd be a great piece to kind of work into this presentation. And I was like, how do I work it in? And then, you know, over the past month, I'd started on the presentation, had some good ideas on what I wanted to say. And things got really busy, so a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of late nights, a lot of bad posture. Last week, I had a pinched nerve in my neck from working, you know, pretty late. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. And then this week, you know, late night again on Monday, didn't really get a lot of sleep, red-eyed in New York. I was in New York, you know, running around the city, getting to meetings. Great meetings, great time, love the city, it's always busy. You know, to kind of reference something Amber was saying, you're kind of picking up conversations everywhere you go in that city. It's like an aggregation of attitude, which was really awesome. Met up with an old friend that night to go out for dinner, and we were talking, and then I just I lost my voice, and it was you know, it was kind of crazy. I told Philippe, I was like, my throat's kind of sore. It feels like it did about 6 or 7 years ago when I traveled overseas, and you know, I just wasn't getting enough sleep and wasn't taking care of myself. And within 15 minutes, I was silent. Got back to his house, and Philippe, he says, have you been in the sun? And I'm like, no, I haven't been in the sun. That was the preamble. I don't know if you can see it, but I had this rash that was on my face, on my arms, on my shoulders. So I'm kind of sharing this because I'm okay now. My voice is a little bit raspy still, but it's the result of about 4 hours sleep in 72 hours. I want to talk to and disagree with something Amber said, which is, you know, from a technology standpoint, your body doesn't really know when you're full. I think my body was telling me I was full. So that also, you know, obviously, it is what it is, but that kind of experience made me think about a podcast I'd listened to going to Tofino a month or two back. And it's from the British archaeologist, The Artificial Ape. And there's a lot more depth to this than what I will share, but I think what was interesting there is this notion that man didn't evolve to create tools. It's that, you know, potentially tools evolved to kind of create or influence mankind. I can see Amber smiling here, so I'm clearly tapping into something she knows much more about than I do. Two things that he's talking about are that stone tools kind of preceded, you know, mankind or the first kind of hominids as we know it, which suggests that, okay, we have stone tools, we can now make other tools, we can catch food, we can get protein, we can take care of our bodies. All of a sudden, we don't need jaws and teeth and claws and all these weapons, and we can actually, you know, push our resources to another part of the human form, which is the brain and the mind, and getting a bit more intelligent, which I thought was a really different way to look at things. The other piece he talks about is the baby sling, and it's kind of following on from that is this notion that human babies are basically, you know, still fetuses, they're just outside, so we need a way to transport them in a way to allow them to kind of grow into actual, you know, beings for a year or 2 years or more. So the baby sling of tool kind of allowed for that to happen, allowed for mankind to exist and continue moving forward in a prosperous way. So that kind of insight made me think, I'm like, well, it's definitely not sustainable to keep working to where your body kind of malfunctions, and it's malfunctioning because of the form and the devices that we're using today. They were so different than they were, when Fred was in high school. I kind of packed this with me because it's, the Star Wars question and answer book about computers. It's from about 1983. So, we haven't actually changed a lot from what C-3PO is doing there, and I think, we really need to think about better ways to use this tech to actually help us and not kind of pull us down. That stuff's not going to stay the same to allow us to evolve over 2 million years. It's going to change so rapidly, and we can't evolve within a generation. So we need to hopefully have the tech evolve to kind of meet our needs. So that was a little preamble. I want to kind of get into things a bit quicker here. Nick and the team kind of asked me about the Cyborg camp. I was super pumped. It was about the same time TED was announced. I've worked with Jordan and a few other people here on TEDx Vancouver the last couple of years. So, hopefully everyone's excited with this news. I think with Cyborg Camp here, with TED next year, it kind of puts us on the map just a little bit more, one more step at a time. I just wanted to quickly poll if anyone's going to TED next year. There we go. So this number's going to change, because I was going to say this is how much we save by coming to Cyborg Camp and not to TED. So, and quickly to put it in perspective, I started thinking about the three organizations, and TED to me is kind of like, the older star everybody's seen and heard. Only the rich people get to go there. TEDx is kind of like Timbaland. He's a producer. He kind of puts his name on things, and a lot of other people do all the hard work. And Cyborg Camp to me, when I heard of it, I hadn't really heard a lot about it, but it kind of felt like years ago, and I'm glad there's some gray hairs here because I got a few older references here. But like when you heard about Nirvana for the first time, you're like, that's really cool. What is it? I don't understand it, but I want to be a part of it. And it had a kind of, je ne sais quoi of Kurt Cobain. So also from Portland, and this kind of starts to get into the story that I want to share, is this guy, and I see Shane nodding because he would know the story well. Bill Bowerman, the University of Oregon track coach. So back in the day, he was an accomplished coach and really drove that program forward. One of the athletes that at least he worked with was this guy named Phil Knight, and together they, Coach Bowerman was like, okay, shoes that are on the market today, they suck. They don't have the responsiveness. They're not light enough. He used his family's waffle iron and made a new pair of shoes. And Phil liked these shoes, and I'm probably getting the story partially wrong, but between them they found an overseas supplier. They found a way to get these new shoes made. They started selling them out of the back of their cars at track meets. And over time they grew and grew and grew. It was a company called Blue Ribbon Sports, and then shortly thereafter they paid $50 for a nice logo and came up with an interesting way to kind of tell stories, and that became Nike. So I was fortunate enough to work with Nike, as Nick alluded to, for the better part of 10 years. A lot of great relationships in that world still, and working on the marketing and kind of brand and digital side of things. So really cool, really innovative environment. The same company that kind of got America running in the late 70s, that kind of created cross-training, they just continue to push things forward. And one of the things that I kind of really take from my time there, well, there's two things. One is that every idea you think you've ever had about sports and digital is on a deck somewhere in Portland, and someone's either presented it or thrown it away, which is really amazing to think about, that ideas are not sacred. So really, just kind of push ideas forward and don't be scared in that capacity. The other thing I learned was that it's storytelling is really what the brand of Nike is all about, and I think what effective communications are reflect is the notion of telling a story of enough interest that it serves as a vehicle for a greater message. And I think it's too easy to combine those two or to think about them as the same sometimes, but there is, you really can, if you look at everything, you can kind of divide the two. So one example, and probably some people will get the reference, others won't, 1988-ish, Bo Jackson was a two-sport athlete. I'd argue the best athlete, at least of our generation, if not of all time. He didn't have a long time to show it because he got injured and a career-ending injury. Baseball and football, he was probably the best player in both sports. Some of the numbers, you know, if we could have put a Nike Plus on them today, it would have just blown the doors off anything people see out of athletes today. Great campaign called Bo Knows. So Bo knows this, Bo knows that, Bo knows baseball, Bo knows football, Bo knows tennis, Bo knows all these things. You know, you could think that at a high level that's kind of intimidating, and it's like, oh wow, well, I can't relate to this person. Why are they telling me this? This is crazy. And it was, and the story was crazy. He was amazing at everything. That's intimidating as all, you know, as can be. The message that you take from that kind of thing is not to be archetyped, is not to be defined, is to just fucking do it. So if somebody tells you you're a runner, you can say, no, I'm not a runner, I'm a baseball player, or I'm a this, or I'm a that, or I'm a mathematician, or what have you. Another story, I've got a few examples as I kind of make my way through my story here. Anne Frank, you know, when you think about this notion of a little girl who was kind of hidden with family and strangers in an attic in a house in Holland during World War II, the fact that somebody would want to write a story, you know, is in and of itself a powerful message. You're in a place where just, you know, there's seemingly no hope, but you're writing stories and saying things like this. In spite of everything, I believe that people are really good at heart. I think that's just an amazing message. Olympics, we know it well being here in Vancouver. The story is achievement. The message is affinity and empathy. That's why 3,000 people will go and start screaming at curling matches, you know, for 2 weeks out of every 4 years. That's why people, you know, care about these things that seemingly that they don't really have a natural attachment to. That's why Eddie the Eagle could become a celebrity. Would have been huge, you know, today if he had a Facebook page and Twitter account. For those who don't know that reference, Eddie the Eagle was this British ski jumper who was completely hopeless, but everybody loved him. Back in my world a little bit, this isn't my work, but it's just a great example, again, of communications and a story and message. The most interesting man in the world, the campaign from Dos Equis last 3 or 4 years. You know, everyone's seen it. I don't need to kind of state what it is, but it's this just super awesome, cool old guy. You might say, okay, why is that relevant for selling beer to young people? And, you know, I saw somebody present this that had worked on it, and the premise was, if I put somebody up there that's super cool, I'm going to polarize. I'm going to have half the people love it, half the people hate it. The message here is really, what would people want to say when their legacy is complete, or when their time is complete? And I think everybody can relate to, like, wow, if I could be anywhere close to some of the stories that this guy has, you know, and you can put it in your own lens, in your own world, that's a pretty amazing message to take away. So, the type actually shows up better here. I want to just talk about another cool old guy. This is Marshall McLuhan. He's a Canadian. Pardon me. He's a kind of pundit and analyst on the notion of media. You know, written a lot of books. I'm sure a lot of people here are familiar. Amazingly prescient in terms of what he was able to see of the future. Kind of describes in the 50s and 60s like this connected world of everybody on, you know, connected all the time through devices and content and this and that and the other. And he kind of coined it the global village, and to us that kind of sounds interesting, but he actually used that term to say, because he was really you know, a protagonist, or you know, he was pro-print, he was anti-visual media, anti-broadcast. The global village to him was saying that everybody becomes the same, because as soon as you tell people what the story is and you explain what it looks like and you give them all the details, there's zero creativity in the understanding of it. There's no mind's eye kind of perception of it. You know, whereas reading a book, everyone has, you know, their own understanding of the story that's in a book. So he said, and where I'm kind of using him for reference is in this quote specifically, the only alternative is to understand everything that's going on, counter and neutralize it as much as possible. Turn off as many buttons as you can. I'm resolutely opposed to all innovation, all change, but I'm determined to understand what's happening. I don't choose to sit and let the juggernaut roll over me. Opposed to innovation and change by this individual who's, you know, making all these outlandish assumptions on the technology of the future, most of them turning out to be correct. But what I really take from that is just the notion of separating yourself from the medium and the message and kind of being an observer. And that's kind of where I was going with the premise of this, and medium message mutation is everything's changing. You know, human beings are changing. Again, the medium and the message and the stories that kind of go, the travel along them are changing. And it kind of, again, becomes that notion of allowing us to be an observer. And I think, humans by our very nature, we're sentient. We kind of have that kind of past, present, future, that understanding of a moment in time. That understanding of the moment in time. I just completely lost my train of thought. I was kind of jumping, that's why, because there's a bit of an awkward jump in my presentation here, but there's just something really cool that I want to share. Humans have that ability to understand and to observe media. I think media, where I was going is kind of tech and digital, and media has evolved to allow us to make it easier for us to be an observer of that too, when we look at all the digital tools out there. It's this notion of meta-tool use. As I said, you can use tools to create tools. It's the ability to observe, it's the ability to understand cause and effect. And I'm going to show a quick second video here, and hopefully we see it. And there's another animal out there that kind of has a similar capacity, and believe it or not, it's a crow. So they've kind of outlined, I'll set it up. There's a small stick, a big stick, and food that's kind of trapped in a little crevice. And the crow obviously doesn't care much about the sticks. Can we see it? We can't see it. So I'm actually just going to give voiceover on the previous screen. Again, it's this notion of tools to facilitate an ending. This study, they hung a small stick on a string. They put a big stick in a cage, if you can see this cage right here. And at the end over here, there's a little piece of food in a kind of crevasse or wedged into the corner of another object. The crow proceeds to jump onto the top of a beam, pull the string up, take the small stick out, go to the cage, pull out the big stick, take the big stick, and go to the other place, take the food, pull it out, and eat it. That's a really unique thing, and it's actually much more amazing to watch the video, so we'll provide the link after this, and I think everyone will be suitably entertained. So, really what I wanted to set up there was this notion of the sentient understanding and kind of being able to be an observer and kind of elevate yourself from the story. I want to quickly go through some pieces that go into it. Authoring tools on a surface, you need to obviously be able to construct the story. Today we have things like that. In the past, it's going back to cave drawings and other ways to kind of communicate stories. And what I love about this is it gives you the notion of a cave drawing is it actually kind of reinforces the notion of being an observer. If I walk in there, and it's kind of fitting how it is now, if I had a torch in my hand and I held it to this side of the drawing, this is a story about buffaloes. If I hold it over here, this is a story about wolves. I think McLuhan was saying that kind of everything is just becoming uniform and nobody even has that kind of perspective on things. You need an audience. The greatest story ever sold, or the greatest book, the greatest distribution is the religious story, whether it's the Bible or other religions. I mean, that's where you have an audience. You have both the means to create the story. You have an audience that kind of needs and wants and needs a bigger story to buy into. You have collaboration. So the School of Athens, I mean, that's the greatest thinkers, of Greek and of the philosophical times, of the start of philosophy. Painted by Raphael, who was in the Enlightenment and was kind of in another group of amazing thinkers. Creative ideas. There's kind of you think about Lewis Carroll, Stephen King, Hunter S. Thompson, Bret Easton Ellis, just completely wacky creative ideas. Social media sometimes outs the source of those ideas. I don't know if anyone saw this Bret Easton Ellis tweet in the middle of the morning a year or so ago. But all kind of levity aside, again, reinforcing the notion, like American Psycho, you read that book, you can interpret it 100 different ways. You watch the film, it's kind of one person's interpretation of that story. So it's kind of, again, reinforcing that. Interactivity, choose your own adventure. I think it's the notion of, okay, people have historically built these stories for themselves as they read them. Now let's put them in it, let them make decisions, let them construct the beginning, middle, and end. For me, it was kind of in this world of Dragon Warrior and Zelda and all these sorts of things, back in the day. And then you kind of move into the more contemporary age, and even this game is a few years old now, but Shadow of the Colossus. It's kind of this just free-form, open-world environment where the user is put into it. It's up to them to explore and up to them to kind of get to the objectives of the game and there's not much else given. So the director kind of talks about it in a sense that if you play my game and you're kind of naturally a good person, you're going to be the hero of the game. If you play my game and you're naturally a bad person, you're going to be the bad guy. Movement. A couple examples here. Movement, stories become movements, movements become stories. I think there's some powerful things here. Rosa Parks. Don't sit at the middle of the bus. This is an exhibit from the court case. Don't sit there where it's circled. We want you to sit back there. And she said no. But then the Women's Political Council in Montgomery, Alabama distributed 35,000 leaflets saying nobody's riding a bus. And all of a sudden that just developed and became a snowball and a snowball effect. And Dr. King kind of obviously referenced and kind of used this as a catalytic moment in equal rights in the US, which is just powerful. All from one person saying something, standing up for it, and 35,000 kind of other people understanding that message. This is A Christmas Carol. That's Ebenezer Scrooge. We can't even see him. Can't even see his eyes. He's got this great look on his face. He's surprised because before Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol, Christmas was like some secondary pagan thing that happened and a few people did something weird about it. And after that book and kind of it getting into popular culture, it became this massive thing that we know it is today. And arguably a big reason for kind of consumer culture and the commerce environment that we have today. On the much darker side is this book written called Rienzi, The Last of the Roman Tribunes. I don't really know the backstory to a lot of this, but I know the story that follows. That inspired, it was about this last Roman tribune who was able to kind of elevate out of his standing and become something greater. That inspired an opera from Wagner, which inspired Evil, which inspired somebody to kind of take that story and run with it and say, I can take media and I can influence a nation to do what I want. There's technology. Technology is a key part of stories. Technology is medium. Security cameras plus YouTube makes security cam happiness. Look it up if you haven't seen it. It's just an amazing piece of work. It's just all these awesome, happy, wonderful events that happen and are picked up, on security cams. Unexpected firemen, people running over to put out a car to push it off the train tracks before this train comes barreling through. Attacks of friendship, people, helping people move couches across the street with a bus coming, that sort of stuff. Technology is message. When we think about Sean Fanning, Sean Parker, create Napster, completely, changed the face of music as we know it, or at least started that ball rolling. So the fall of an empire there, the rise of an empire here with Facebook, and I think it's still very early days there. So what exactly is my story? Why did I kind of painstakingly set all that up and uncomfortably forget something in the middle? The story I wanted to share, and I've always, it started here on this island. It was a lot of years before, Hurley and Sawyer and Jack and all these people came along. It was actually the island where I was born. So it's an island called Terschelling. It's in the North Sea off the north coast of Holland. This is a farmhouse that again, we can't really see it, but that's a farmhouse that my dad had converted from a barn into the home where I at least spent a couple of years, the early part of my life. And that's where it is, and today it's 4,700 people. It's probably grown 100 people in the last 50 or 60 years, so it's pretty slow over there. It's kind of strategically placed. So there's a lot of shipping routes in the North Sea. Containers fall off. Lots of Nikes wash up on the shore. So the people of Terschelling are very well-heeled and well-footed. I was there last just too long ago, probably about 10 years ago, and somebody told me that everyone basically has the same fridge, which I thought was really cool. So because it's strategically placed, it was also strategically placed, and I've kind of touched on this moment in time a couple times, 70 years ago. It's got a harbor, it's a strategic point when you're thinking about trying to dominate a part of the world, and that's the soldiers marching. And the soldiers marched through. They marched through the entire country of Holland. They marched through Terschelling and occupied. So a part of the story I wanted to share is this is my grandfather, my opa. I didn't really know him before he passed away, and I kind of put that image up earlier, the notion of a radio. And you know, he was a part of the Dutch resistance. He had a radio in the basement. You know, I try and think about this all the time. It's like, how can you even relate to that kind of thing? Well, what do we have in our basement? We have like an Xbox and, you know, things like that. It's completely such a different world. It's 70 years ago. How has technology changed? How has our culture changed? So, you know, he had the radio. He was using it to facilitate information transfer from, you know, within enemy lines to outside, and you know, as the only piece of technology of communication technology on the island at that time. It's amazing when you think of it. I try and think about that time, and I don't want to make light of the situation because it's just not fair, but I think it's just impossible for us to comprehend because, you know, what would happen if we had social media, or if they had social media. You know, if you wanted to know, you know, when not to open the front door. 12 people you don't know are outside your door. And also, you know, just to have news, to know what's actually happening. So Foursquare, you know, General Patton is now the mayor of Bavaria. I think that would be valuable information. We don't get a lot of value out of these formats, unfortunately. So where I'm going with this is this notion of technology facilitating knowledge transfer, facilitating awareness. So as more people have more knowledge, it's inherently more valuable. It's inherently more interesting. And again, it's facilitated by technology. So, you know, that might be far too easy to say. I'd agree with you. Because what we have right now is this world where we're always on, we're always connected, we have pinched nerves in our neck, and, you know, we can't talk because we don't sleep because we're staring at screens. And, you know, you can look at it and say, okay, well, that's what is actually happening here. You know, there's a lot of information being created, consumed, shared, all these sorts of things. And this is kind of what we're seeing. You know, slacktivism is a term that Malcolm Gladwell coined, and it's this notion that, you know, we're creating these generations of people who are just consuming information and feel by consuming it or liking it or whatever that they're being a part of something bigger. And, you know, I think that's a good observation, but it's like, really? That's like, when did the like happen? 4 years ago? It was a poke before that. You couldn't poke a video, I guess. I don't know. It's such a short span of time that I would argue that, like, is that better than not having anything? Is that better than having one radio in one town, in every town, and trying to share information that way and trying to be on top of things? And I think that's something that's kind of being missed, you know, in this kind of the hate on for the uselessness of digital and social media. What I want to say is that it's kind of a byproduct of the medium. So, you know, just like C-3PO here, he's just sitting there banging away and probably, I don't know, he's actually got decent posture, but, you know, he should have a little bit better angle at the knee. But really, it's kind of slacktivism is a byproduct of how we engage with tech right now. It encourages you and incentivizes you and rewards you and gives you points and all this stuff to sit there and do nothing. But the medium's changing, and that's why I think it's such a short-term thing. So that you think about speed, relevance, and context. Speed can be like the speed of connection. It could be the compression capacities we have for file size. I was just reading something the other day about some cellular storage where they can store like 250 terabytes on a cell. So it's like everything is just changing to make things more pervasive. There's relevance. There's a great studio called Invoke who made this great app that will let you find great Ono to go in Honolulu, because you can find Ono anywhere, but you want to find the best stuff. So it's relevance of information when you need it. It's not just telling me what my social pulse is doing in real time. There's context, and I got to jump off that image because Shane will kill me, but he'll probably tell us some really cool things about wearable technologies and how we can get contextual information in real time through perhaps things like, I don't know, glasses and things like that. We've been on a march, so energy, you know, development of new energies, development of the Hadron Colliders and biotech and the Genome Project and 3D printers like we saw out front. And, you know, where this is going, it's like, you could say it's like one big game and everything's kind of in it and it's progressing, but it's actually, I'd like to think that it's like many big games because they're all getting super complex, super crazy, super intense. But it's, you know, if biotech is Minecraft, then the economy is World of Warcraft, and agriculture is something else completely. They're not talking to each other. There's too much friction. There's walls in between these specialists, the understanding and schools of thought. And it's kind of ingrained in our educational system. It's kind of ingrained by the fact that you can be a doctor in understanding, like, the finer points of one piece of the circuit board in this audio piece here. And there's not enough friction in that it's too easy for people to swim in their lanes and just stay in their lanes and not have a clear visibility on all the other things that are going on. So, here's a kind of theoretical example, and then I want to start wrapping it up with an actual example that I came upon a couple weeks ago. Saw these guys present a couple of years ago, Singularity University, and they're trying to tackle that head on. They're trying to say, okay, let's get some of the smartest people around the world and let's get them together so they get out of their silos and out of their construct that has them solving these amazing but very kind of minute and kind of discrete problems, and let's see if we can tackle something bigger. And then a couple weeks ago, I was at the alumni meeting for UVic's 50th anniversary, and this notion, I'll use that to explain the story. The word I want to introduce is synecdoche. For anyone on TEDx knows that I published an enormous email a year or two ago kind of saying this should be the theme, so I just had to get it into here somehow. It actually comes from a Greek word which means simultaneous understanding. And the example I put it to is this Neptune project. So off the coast of Vancouver Island, there's this amazing project happening where there's these undersea sensors. They're kind of tracking everything from ocean currents to movements to tectonic activity to fish and organisms and all this kind of stuff, temperatures. They were able to measure the Iranian earthquake a few weeks back. They were able to kind of pick it up there. So it's this amazing kind of collection of all these different pieces of data, and they're publishing it to the web. So you can kind of access what's in there and kind of take everything to do with as you like. So some of the examples are like, okay, we'll be able to predict when a tsunami's coming. I love surfing, I love going to the beach. Imagine sitting there and you get a text and it says you have 15 minutes, find the blue signs, get out of there. That is really cool. That is at an individual level. What blew me away was afterwards I was talking with the doctor who was presenting this stuff, and there were some other people there, and they were talking about this notion of big data and what does it mean, how do we connect the dots, and somebody was talking about a project that they're looking at which would allow us to take that kind of information, you plug it in through some machine learning and probabilistic stuff, and then we know that if there's something happening, we can shut off trains, we can shut off gas lines, we can shut off electricity, and all of a sudden you start to see this stuff really making a difference. It's not just telling you when to run, it's going to save potentially millions of lives, especially when you think about the larger issue of just how many people live along the coastlines and all the things that are happening there. So that's really where I saw it coming together. And I think it all comes back to powerful stories and the message that kind of comes with, and the ability to observe. So stories need to happen, and people need to observe. If the tree falls, somebody's got to be there to listen to it. And like any story, I just want to wrap it up with what I kind of introduced in the middle. And I got these pictures last summer, and I was just like, these are too good to like just sit on my desk or something next to my book. This is a picture of the Dutch resistance on Terschelling helping the Brits off the boat at the end of the war. And here's my grandfather, shaking hands with the British commander. And that just, to me, was kind of just such an inspirational story. So I'll leave it with that. Hope that was interesting. Thank you.